Greetings, I'm Dike Rostant. Welcome back to the TTT News. We are very happy to be joined by none other than a coordinator at the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services, Cindy Heeralal, and we are going to be speaking about the NGO unit. It is time to go in depth on the NGO unit. Welcome, Ms. Heeralal. How are you doing?
I am well, thanks, Dike, and thank you for having me on your program.
It is our pleasure. Now, I want to start off, please, because many times we hear about funding, So what type of funding can NGOs receive from the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services?
Right, so let me just couch that in a context for you. So the NGO unit, our mandate really is to manage the relationship between social sector NGOs, particularly those that are serving in line with the vulnerable groups and populations that the ministry seeks to enable and empower. And managing that relationship, we'll look at three main areas. One looks at funding support, and I'll get into that in a little bit. We look at capacity building and opportunities to enhance organizations. And then we also look at opportunities and ways to engage organizations to assist us with our social service delivery mandate. So that in a nutshell just paints a picture of how we engage NGOs in the relationship. So funding, yes, funding is a critical area. It is the constant cry of many organizations that there isn't enough funding. And especially now with the COVID-19 pandemic, organizations have seen a shrivel in the funding streams that have normally been available to them. They cannot fundraise the way they would have been able to pre-COVID. So it's forced organizations to become quite innovative now in terms of how they adapt their operations, how they serve and continue to serve populations and communities to have the same impact. So we get a number of requests, running requests, open requests throughout the fiscal year to support organizations in two particular ways. One is through a subvention mechanism, and that really is a percentage of a recurrent expenditure that the organization will incur to keep the operations of the NGO going. And that will cover things like salaries, rental, administrative costs to enable the organization to deliver the services that they deliver. That is quite an exhaustive process. It is subject to the approval of cabinet. It is also subject to funding availability. And there are a number of checks that go into that subvention request, such as investigative checks, looking at the eligibility of the organization, also looking at the capacity and the competency of the organization to deliver the social service or the social program. The popular mechanism that NGOs come to the ministry for is through our small grants facility. So it's a one-off grant facility that they can access for the fiscal period at two different levels: grant funding at a value of $10,000 and under, or grant funding at a value of above $10,000 at a cap of $50,000. So those are the two funding streams. The one-off grant facility, we look at small grants funding project for unique social programs that are serving the vulnerable populations that the ministry serves. So to just shed some light on that, those would be NGOs that are delivering services for persons with disabilities, working in the area of women, children, and youth, services for the elderly, persons who may be affected by substance abuse, and even gender-based violence. So those are the types of requests that we tend to get from time to time. During the last fiscal period, we've seen a lot of requests for food support and food sustainability. And that just goes to show, as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, we have to eat to live. And that is in need of the communities, particularly the vulnerable groups. So a lot of NGOs are now offering that type of service to vulnerable populations, and they have been accessing the grant facility for those types of requests, as well as a number of other requests.
All right, thank you so much for that. Now, one of the things that you mentioned was building capacity. And I think it would be a beautiful thing to be able to facilitate an NGO moving from a space of wanting to get a consistent source of funding to possibly a one-off grant, or possibly even approaching or engaging for this kind of support. What do you mean, though, when you say building capacity?
Right. So in the context of the NGOs under the remit of the ministry and those that we directly engage with, when we say building capacity, we're particularly looking at the financial accountability and the reporting mechanism and requirements that are tied to accessing the funding streams that are available. So to give you an example, we have a lot of passion coming from these NGOs. These organizations start off as really, passionate projects and initiatives. It may be one personality that's driving the NGO, they may be the engine room of the organization. But what we're not seeing in some cases is the sustainability of the organization and succession planning. What happens when that personality is no longer there? Where is the plan in place? What does the strategic planning look like in terms of moving the organization forward? So we are seeing where there's a lot of need for support in terms of being able to work with these organizations to accurately report on their expenditure. And we have developed the requisite tools to assist them with doing that. I just want to emphasize accountability for state funds. We put a lot of emphasis on that and making sure that these organizations are aware of the requirements to report and to report accurately. So over the last fiscal, we've done a lot of one-to-one work and engagement with these organizations to ensure that they are compliant with the ministry's reporting guidelines and requirements. And I think that can work as a baseline to now move on to other funding streams, because if you can get the nuts and bolts right in terms of what the state as a donor is looking for, you do have a sense of experience going forward in terms of what maybe international donors look for, or other agencies, private agencies. So we really want to ensure that we are giving that type of guidance and support, get it right with us, and then it's going to enable you going out there to look at other sustainable funding streams as well. So that's internally what we've been doing in terms of capacity building with our reporting mechanism. There are some other things we've been working on in terms of knowledge sharing with NGOs, and that really is bringing our core together. We have 22 organizations that we directly interact with, along with a number of other NGOs that access our funding mechanism, funding facility. And we launched, we started over 2021 initiative called a knowledge sharing initiative. And really what that is to bring our core together, experienced NGOs, strong NGOs with those that may be struggling in some areas, where we can have a sense of experiential learning and a knowledge exchange, where the stronger NGOs, the well-established ones, the ones that are accessing international funding and really are pros at this, they can share from their experience how they've been able to navigate systems and mechanisms and how they have been able to succeed. And we take it as a good practice. Eventually we'll get to best practice, but at least it establishes a particular standard of operating and that knowledge being there for NGOs to glean from. So that's internally what we are looking at.
And in the last minute we have before we go to the break, how easy is that process of engaging different NGOs to literally share secrets? Because I can see the scenario where someone say, okay, well, this pie that I'm getting slices from is finite. So I'm not going to tell you what I'm doing, how I'm successful in getting resources to fund my initiatives and my efforts. So what has that process of engaging these 22 stakeholders been like for you from your perspective?
Well, in general, this sector, yes, resources are limited. So if I tell you my secret, it probably means I don't have as good a chance. And I think, we need to move away from that type of thinking. It's let me help you learn and learn from my success story. So what we've done we've really focused on relationship building with the organizations that we directly serve and have contractual arrangements with, and focusing on how we enhance that relationship to say, hey, you know, we're on the same page here, we're on the same team. And I think this may be an opportunity to learn from another NGO that's done well in this particular case, because it's going to help you sustain your organization in a better way. So it's really about understanding from the NGO perspective as the donor, as the government side, really understanding their needs, what their challenges are, and making a very concerted effort to assist them with respect to enhancing operations and being able to just do a little bit better.
And we continue this conversation with you. When we return, we are speaking with Cindy Heeralal, Coordinator at the NGO Unit, Ministry of Social Development and Family Services. Stay with us. We come back with more. Welcome back. We are going in depth on the work of the NGO unit at the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services. We are speaking with Coordinator Cindy Heeralal on this very timely objective body unit initiative. And Ms. Heeralal, what are some of the differences that you get, and do you have to treat with them differently? Because now I'm hearing a little more about CSOs as opposed to just NGOs. Does that fall under your remit as well?
Yes, so the generally accepted terminology is civil society organizations. Commonly, and it's really about how organizations self-identify. Commonly, what we're seeing is a lot of organizations will either refer to themselves as a non-governmental organization or not-for-profit, but the broader terminology is civil society organization, and that encompasses faith-based organizations, community groups, NGOs, even academia, labor groups as well. We deal specifically with organizations that are legally registered as NGOs, and those organizations really are so multidimensional in terms of the types of services that they offer and the various kinds of expertise that they have couched within themselves. You know, you have those that are young and now mapping their way out in terms of developing a particular legacy or developing a particular type of culture. And then we have those that are well-seasoned stalwarts in the sector that are now, you know, working with the younger NGOs and the ones that are, you know, still struggling and navigating to really enhance capacity and look at development aspects of this sector as well.
And one of the things that I look at is the way that you have different banks for buck. And I say that because at the risk of just singling one person, looking at, is there not a cause, ITNAC, and the way that they have their organization set up. So there is a great deal more volunteer aspect, but it is worked into the system, so it is entrenched. So it is not just a personality, but it's policy versus some others, and I call no names here, that may have a great deal more global reach, but at the same time, the amount of resources that goes in at the beginning, you don't necessarily find them coming out at the end to the parties that need them the most. But in terms of assessing and saying, okay, well, we're looking at the makeup, the structure, the organization, the policies that you have in place. Is it something that is policy driven? Is it something that is personal and passion based? How do you go about assessing these bodies, saying, all right, we have resources, these are the resources we have, these will be apportioned to you because of the way that your organization is set up?
Right. So there are policies that govern how we engage and determine funding, and there's a lot of due diligence that has to go into that process. So, you know, we look at your legal registration, we look at your governance structure, particularly governance at the level of the board, and that really is the engine to drive the strategic direction and the sustainability of the organization. And it's a critical component of organizational sustainability, not just for-profit organizations, but the social sector NGOs. You know, it is something that I think we are looking at focusing more on now, and especially looking at how government, especially on the ministry side, we can look at lending technical expertise in particular areas, and those may be areas that the organization doesn't have the resources to really develop in a particular area. They can benefit from the ministry through the technical expertise. So we're looking at partnerships and how we can enhance those partnerships. But as I said, the due diligence is very necessary. We do have a checklist that we look at. We look at prioritizing as well in terms of the vulnerable groups that may be in need. There may be a lot of organization providing, let's just say, food support, but then you may have organizations that are dealing with cerebral palsy or persons with disabilities that need a particular type of support in an area. So it's not a blanket approach. We really have to look at the availability of funding, what is available, what can we fund, what is sustainable, and what really fits in line with the ministry's mandate in terms of the vulnerable groups that the ministry serves in particular. And we actually are in better position now, having recently undertaken an assessment of the sector, having engaged a Cropper Foundation to do that for the ministry, which will help us get a better sense of some of the challenges that organizations are facing, looking at issues of resilience, sustainability. We're also looking at efficiency and effectiveness. So that assessment has come at a really timely point where we're going into 2022, looking at what are the specific types of support we can now look at offering the sector and offering social sector NGOs. So we'll be road mapping that over this next fiscal in terms of the particular types of support and what we need to do on the government side in terms of advocating for maybe financing, greater financing. It may be revising the legal framework. It may be policy driven, but some of the things coming out of that would be like the ease of doing business as an NGO, as an organization, so that they can deliver on their projects much easier than having, you know, these barriers that they normally are faced with. So we're in a better position now that we have undertaken that type of assessment. We are in a better position to look at particular types of support that can be given to varying NGOs.
Very glad to hear that. In the 2.5 minutes that we have remaining, there are two questions I want to ask. One, how do NGOs contact the unit, get into a relationship with you, be it for resources that may be financial or building capacity, and also that timeline that you spoke about over the last fiscal? What has the feedback been from some of the NGOs that are now saying, okay, well, we're doing things that we're supposed to a little more? Are you getting that as well?
Yes. So when we engaged our core group earlier this year, the feedback was so fantastic and encouraging, because what we found is that there needs to be a sounding board with the sector in terms of government and social sector. If we really want to enhance the relationship and we really want to have a cohesive all of government and all of society approach to tackling social issues, we really have to look at civil society as a partner in this with us. And the feedback has been phenomenal. It really is a channel for us to be able to hear some of the concerns. There are some learnings that came out of our engagement sessions over this year that it was fantastic, just in terms of customer service and being service driven, being able to assist an NGO to navigate certain processes in a way like, how do I register with your organization, with your institution? How do I access funding? We build that personal relationship with the organization and do that one-on-one, walking them through. So any organization wishing to get in touch with us and find out more about how we can assist, our information is on the ministry's website, www.social.gov.tt. Our application forms for our funding mechanisms are also available, or you can visit the ministry's NGO unit office at Nahu's building on St. Vincent Street. And we would be happy to provide whatever information and assistance that we can.
And we want to thank you for providing the information that you have at this point in time, Ms. Heeralal. Cindy Heeralal, Coordinator of the NGO Unit, Ministry of Social Development and Family Services. And on behalf of the entire TTT News team, this has been In Depth with me, Dike Rostant. Thank you for tuning in.